the Sea of Okhotsk. The Vsevolod Sibirtsev floating ship has been operating here for several months. The expedition also includes trawlers. They catch fish, and fast reefer ships. They deliver finished products ashore, covering thousands of miles in a short time, regardless of the weather and season. Vsevolod Sibirtsev is a huge construction, which is 179 meters long and has a displacement of more than 26,000 tons. In size, it's even bigger than the largest passenger aircraft, A380. In a day, the floating base can process about 600 tons of fish. For 9 long months, it becomes not only a workplace for 435 crew members, but also their home at sea. We spent several weeks in the expedition and covered thousands of kilometers. And all of this is to understand what it means to live at sea. Vladivostok, Dobroflot's head office. It's not just removed from the place where Vsevolod Sibirtsev operates, it is even located near the waters of another sea, the Sea of Japan. Nevertheless, it is here where managers organize the work not only of the floating base, the size of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, but of the entire expedition. Fishing vessels that catch fish take it to the floating base, and thereby shorten the delivery time of fish products for processing. That is, the production occurs directly at sea. In addition to raw materials, that is, fish, the functioning of the floating factory also requires containers, spices, equipment, food for the crew. All this is delivered by special vessels, reefer ships. They also pick up finished products. One of these such vessels is Gardermonia. In 4 days, the ship Gardermonia crossed the Sea of Okhotsk diagonally and moored to the port side of Vsevolod Sibirtsev. Vladimir Slizov, the captain of Gardermonia, and Valery Voloshin, the captain-director of the floating base, mastered mooring in the sea successfully, but the storm got in the way of planned unloading. It's common practice. The entire fleet, both the fishing ships and the floating factory, will most likely go to the Magadan region to hide from the bad weather. The weather. It is rarely favorable, especially in winter. Autumn and winter. There are storms, so you never leave the bridge. The presence of the captain on the bridge during mooring is mandatory. The reverse process also does not do without a high-ranking ship supervisor. Now the ships have to unmoor in order to continue their joint work, but now in the area safe from the storm, in the Shelting Bay. Unloading can be carried out in sufficiently good weather. So if the weather conditions worsen, naturally we have to unmoor, wait for the weather to improve, and then make another attempt. Moor again to continue loading fish products. Once in the relatively calm waters of the Shelting Bay, the captains Slizov and Voloshin are moving closer again. We are ready to moor, over. Mooring teams, stand by for mooring. The port side. Everything is happening as if in slow motion. It seems that there is nothing dangerous in these maneuvers. The speed is too low. Low by our land standards. But ocean liners are objects with enormous masses, and their inertia is huge. So any mistake on board can have some real serious effects. In the last minutes before the approach, the mooring scheme is again discussed. The ends are the same. 4 lateral ones from our bow, 4 from our stern, 2 spring ropes from your bow, and, well, 2 from your stern. Over. Understood. Start BT. BT is a bow thruster. It's a powerful electric motor installed in the front of the ship, which allows you to turn a huge machine without resorting to complex manipulations with the main engines and the rudder blade, an irreplaceable thing when mooring at sea. Petrovich, I'll turn left a little with the BT, just a little. Okay, great. Yeah, so that you won't have to turn. Go as you do. The mooring process is going on like clockwork, and after several minutes, the unloading can start again, while the weather permits. The Shelting Bay is like an emergency shelter for everyone who is caught in a storm in the northern part of the Sea of Okhotsk. Usually, it is quite deserted. But now, in this relatively small bay, several dozen ships have gathered, including the fishing trawlers that operate with the Vsevolod Sibirtsev floating base. A strong wind is blowing here too, but the water is calm, so Garmonia again moored to the shipping base to fill 2 of its 3 holds with products. It's only 2 of the 3 because the third is still filled with what sailors call provisions, or more precisely, with packing materials and food both for the floating base and for the trawler seiners. The problem is that the Russian legal system prohibits operations with similar cargoes in territorial waters. Therefore, as soon as the weather at sea improves, the ships will part so that Garmonia will be able to moor beyond the territorial waters. And only then the process of loading and unloading will continue. Trawler seiners are fishing ships. They also need to wait out the storm. And this means that the stock of raw materials on Vsevolod Sibirtsev are rapidly decreasing, and in a few hours the conveyor belts of the factory ship will be empty. If the equipment is operational and there is enough electricity supply, the factory can stop only for 2 reasons. First, the warehouse is full, and second, there is a lack of raw materials. But regardless of the reasons, after mandatory sanitation in such cases, everything has to stop, and the factory turns from a source of income into a generator of losses. Losses, to put it mildly, are serious. Each day of such a huge floating base being at sea costs about 1 million rubles. But not only shareholders and managers are upset. Each employee of the enterprise, in addition to a relatively modest salary, also receives a bonus part, or the share. And the amount of this share depends on the quantity of products produced. In the sailors' language, it's called to earn from each tale. The only thing the team on Sibirtsev is thinking about is how to resume work as soon as possible. First of all, we need fish. First of all, we see that we have free space. We must go out with the fleet to fish, and this must be done, like to lead everyone for fishing. But while the weather doesn't let the fishing expedition to sea, the crew of Vsevolod Sibirtsev will not lose time. There is always a lot of work on a huge ship. In addition to sanitation, you need to deal with routine repairs, and no one canceled the loading of the ship. And now, finally, the waves in the open sea become lower, 1.5 meters. And this means that seiner trawlers can again go fishing. And the head of production has to prepare to receive the catch. Garmonia unmoored in order to moor to the floating base once again, but now at open sea. The work with the load will be finished later. It would have been wiser for us, let's say, to stop yesterday and go fishing and catch fish. And now, as the weather calms down, we'll work again. We'll take supplies and then continue to unload it later. One hold is empty. We'll fill it. Special ships catch fish for the floating base. They are marked by the abbreviation STR. There is some French reverse word order in the way it is deciphered. Seiner, trawler, refrigerator. The first two words mean that they can catch fish with different gear. And the letter R and, well, the corresponding word are inherited from the Soviet Union. Now there are now refrigerators. So when the net, which is overboard, is ascended to the platform, I hope it will be full of proper herring. The fish will be loaded into those tanks. They are called folds. The shelf life is very short, even in winter, just a few hours, up to 12. So the work pace of STR, or fishing ships, as they are called sometimes, is very fast. We can say like in sport. After delivering the first catch to the base after the storm, Sergei Bova takes his Kalinovka trawler to the place where other Dobro floats fishing ships saw shoals of herring. It takes 4 hours, so the crew sees the dawn while sailing. The straight 8-cylinder diesel engine has 1,320 horsepower. It's kind of a lot, but Kalinovka can't be called fast. At a maximum speed of 13 knots, we go to the fishing area at 10 knots. This STR Kalinovka was built as a part of the Project 503. It was one of the most popular in the Soviet era. With a length of just over 50 meters, this ship belongs to the medium tonnage, that is, far from being the smallest. But nevertheless, in comparison with the floating base, it is, of course, just a shell. And only here you can understand what the real sway is. Everyday conditions for the crew are also difficult to describe as comfortable. It's just small, but nevertheless, a team of 23 people will spend several months on this ship catching fish. And this is not even a record. One of the fishing ships that work with Sibirtsev has already been at sea for 7 months and is not yet going back. In the GDR alone, nearly 1,000 fishing vessels were commissioned by the Soviet Union in the first 9 post-war years and built. On average, a ship was launched once in 3 days. The ships were also commissioned in Denmark, Finland, Greece, Japan, but Soviet shipbuilders kept up with it. Over 300 STRs of the Project 503 were built. Sergei Bova hasn't been on the Project 503 for a long time. Just a month ago, he came from a smaller fishing ship. Between the answers to my questions, he also manages to give commands to the officer on duty. There is a tension, as if we are participating in an unspoken competition on trawler of herring. However, this assumption the captain rejected immediately. Nikolaich, 5.3. There were such situations. But now the company distributes shares equally between the ships, so that each vessel can earn, and fewer people, well, flee from ships. 5 and 3, just addressed to Nikolaich, is the propeller blade angle of attack. Like most trawlers, Kalinovka is equipped with a so-called ABP, adjustable blade propeller. This mechanism allows you to change the blade angle of attack, changing the thrust without changing the engine speed. By the way, in addition to the main engine, Project 530 STRs also have 2 side ones. Managing all this isn't a hard task for an experienced captain, but the captain of a fishing vessel is also a skilled fisherman. And this is just not being taught anywhere. Everything comes with experience. Well, of course, if anyone has experience, then all this is written down in notebooks, and eventually, when you become a commander, you open them and you read. Igor Valiev is one of those who has seen a lot and absorbed enough knowledge to take the position of a chief fishing master. He is also called the trawler master. This is not the executive officer, nor the captain's immediate assistant, but the importance of this position on a ship is hard to overestimate. It is he who knows all the details of setting up a trawl. It's something without which fishing is not possible. Trawls are different. They are, let's say, we're working with 107 now. The trawl's pattern is, well, different here. So you need to set HDD correctly so that it will open. Load the bottom for the trawl to open and work normally. Well, the same is with the net, so that more fish will get into it, obviously. And Igor Yurievich gave a simplified version. After all, in fact, everything is much more complicated. The SDR is equipped with the so-called different depth trawl. This snare is intended for catching fish in the pelagic zone, that is, in the water layer where the herring lives. The trawl 107, Dobroflot's development, is called so because of the length of the upper and lower sets. They are, in simple terms, steel ropes holding the trawl's wings, whose task is to catch fish and send it to the net, to the tail part of the tackle. The upper set has bobbers. They are called fishing floats, and the lower set has a weight system. Well, HDD is a hydrodynamic device, a system of trawl boards and plates which ensure the correct horizontal opening and position of the trawl in the water layer. The trawl is connected to the ship with wires or steel ropes, and all this needs to be adjusted and managed by the team. Well, let's say, no need to reinvent the wheel. They used to fish before. Sometimes you introduce some novelty, but in general, the setting of the trawl is described in the theory, yet in practice, you use some of your own methods. Something's wrong. You do it your own way. At this time, the captain is sitting in a compartment with screens of sonars, and therefore it's like the workplace of an aviation navigator, or to a flight control center. Only now it's not a satellite in orbit that is flying, but a trawl in the waters of the Sea of Okhotsk. Right now it is clearly visible there is a shoal of herring in our course, and we're trying to pursue the shoal on it. We can't determine the shoal's density in our course, but if the color is red, then it should be dense. The trawl disappeared into the cold water, and now the captain keeps track of the fish entering the net. There shouldn't be too many, otherwise the tender herring will simply crumble. But of course, the crew wouldn't like to take out an empty net. This is a trawl control device. Everything's kind of simple here. The bottom is red. That's where the trawl is. Then there is the trawl's opening. This is the fish. The process of trawling demands increased attention and trained accuracy. Surfacing shouldn't be allowed, or the trawl will pass by the fish. Touching the bottom is also prohibited for environmental reasons. Moreover, it can tear the trawl. Well, if it's torn, it's torn. Nothing to do there. You've got to repair it, depending on the size of the tear. You can repair it for an hour or 4 hours. Well, sometimes you tear the trawl, then you just roll it up and take a new one. Like, that one cannot be repaired. Well, to tear a trawl isn't so easy. It was hard for our ancestors. They could forecast the weather only by beliefs. Now, the storm cannot actually catch the sailors off guard. When approaching the base in 10, 15 miles away, there is internet access. We update. There is such a program as GRIB. It's pretty much applied to this area. We look at the wind, wave height. Well, plus we take Japanese maps. Somehow, this is all difficult to understand. A trawler built in 1985. An abundance of color monitors and the internet here, in the middle of the cold sea, 9 time zones away from Moscow. But there it is, and I even clearly see that the trawler works. It catches fish. There is a young but experienced captain who cares more about people than electronics. I look at people. Well, when I come here, I already understand them. On the shore, I do not understand people 100%. You can understand people only at work. When the ship is working, you have some working situations. And this is month after month, despite the weather, the duration of the expedition, and your own mood. No, emotions never change. The only thing is that everything is familiar here. It's just psychologically hard. As they say, a confined space. The crew, how many people do we have? Several, like 25 people, let's say. The same people all the time. And by the end of the expedition, you get bored with it. But anyway, you get used to everything. The trawler has been in the water for 2 hours, and the captain discontentedly says that the flow of fish has almost dried out. How much there is in the net is impossible to determine here, and the captain struggles with the temptation to take a reverse course to trawl this shoal again, but nevertheless decides to pick up the tackle. Zheka, take in sail. After the wires were chosen and the load thundered across the deck, multicolored trawl's wings appear. But here comes a problem. The cable of one of the sensors is tangled and doesn't let us continue. Together, we eliminate the problem, and finally the net appears from the water. The net tightly packed with Pacific herring. Fishermen are happy. There are more than 80 tons. Take in sail. Stop! Wires! Of course, there is some kind of inner joy that there is a full net of fish. Naturally, when it is empty, well, somehow boring. And then there is already excitement of some kind. I want to put it in there again, catch more fish. Of course, it's all about making money, so to speak. Igor Yurievich easily performs acrobatic tricks on the tightly filled net, finding enough time to give orders to other sailors. This work is for experienced fishermen, and the best that I can do for them is just not to interfere. And at the same time, to think how soon I, as a person who spent most of my life on the shore, will want to be, if not on the shore, but on a ship a little bit bigger. And doesn't the captain want this? No, I still don't want to, because I'm excited about fishing. Therefore, I want to be a fisherman. Well, fishing, which at first did not impress, proved to be very successful. On board, there are more than 80 tons of herring. The folds are filled, and now Kalinovka is waiting for its turn to moor to the floating base and unload the catch onto the factory. Of course, I wasn't allowed to real fishing acrobatics, to manipulate with the filled trawler, but instead, I managed to participate in untangling the gear, back up the sailors, and salt my hands in the Sea of Okhotsk. In general, I felt a sense of belonging. But most importantly, I know that here, under several layers of clothing, I have a key. The key is to the warm cabin at the floating base, Vsevolod Sibirtsev. That is, to such a place which is spacious, cozy, does not swing, where there is heat and wireless internet, and even a sauna. And very soon I will be there. And these guys will continue to work here. And they will work for more than one more month. It took only 3 hours to set up the trawl to its ascent to the deck. During this time, the floating base has already managed to get closer to the fishing ship, and in less than an hour, Kalinovka will take place in the line for the delivery of the catch. The captain has a rare opportunity to sleep. But after 4.5 hours in the darkness, he took his place at the control panel of the thruster propellers and moored to the starboard side of Vsevolod Sibirtsev. The unloading of raw materials begins. The factory revived again. Herring is sorted and sent to different shops. Bigger fish is for freezing. Smaller fish is for canned food. But regardless of the fish size, it first gets processed. By the way, for a 21st century person, there seems to be a lot of manual work. However, this is the only way to achieve the necessary flexibility of production. Machines take up a lot of free space, and even on such a ship, it is not enough. And it's easier to teach a person than reprogram a machine. There are plenty of people, but people are going to make money without realizing until the end that it will be necessary to make great efforts in the sea before making money. And the efforts are both physical and psychological. The second, it seems, is more important than the first, because you can imagine how, for several hours in raw, you do the same manipulations over and over, but you can't know the state of your mind will change during 9 months, far from your family, from your friends. For that, you've got to have a lot of experience or a really developed imagination. Not everyone will cope. Here, they've got to be ready to come, be assigned to certain tasks, and get started. Of course, a master will teach them how to do that. For example, how to clean or operate a machine. This is necessary, and everything else depends on the person. Before getting on board of the ship, future factory workers are in the training center in the village of Yuzhno-Morskoy. Here, 1,500 people every year get knowledge and skills necessary for everyone in the fleet. Here, they are taught to extinguish fires and save products from combustion gases. For example, everyone must be able to put on a red rescue suit quickly. Without it, you cannot survive in the cold water. And to make sure of this, there is, let's say, a swift descent into the Sea of Okhotsk with the subsequent application of a storm ladder. Don't do this like a cat. Don't climb. Here, you grasp the rope and put this hand as high as possible. And also grasp the rope. Yes. But that's not all. After a jump into the water and a short rest on the life raft, an imitation of rescue with a helicopter is to be done. An electric winch is like an aircraft. Well, what can I say? In a sense, to be rescued isn't easier than to rescue. Vsevolod Sibirtsev is not just a floating base. Its design is well thought out. Thus, living quarters are located in the bow and stern superstructures. Moreover, cabins can be compared to cozy hotel rooms. In addition to the gym, there is a cinema, saunas, a swimming pool, and even a hospital. The vast majority of ships have medical facilities and doctors. But when there are over 400 people on board, and they are on the same ship for 9 months, the likelihood of someone getting sick is inevitably approaching 100%. Therefore, there is not just a medical unit on Sibirtsev, but an entire onboard clinic. It's not just about the crew. Like mechanical workshops, Vsevolod Sibirtsev's medical facilities should serve the entire expedition. That is, if the ship's doctor, for example, on the trawler can't cope with the severe trauma, the victim is transported to the shipping base, and thus, sometimes a life is saved. Well, in general, harsh conditions at sea don't have many positive effects on one's health. Permanent living in damp conditions, in cold conditions, is perfect for the development and flaring up of chronic diseases. Is it really so hard to work on the floating base? It's time to check out for myself. Having dressed in the necessary overalls, I'm going to take my place at the conveyor belt. Now, I am a factory worker. You get used to the smell, oddly enough, pretty quickly. But something which is hard to get used to, at least for me, is this noise, which makes you want to run away immediately. Covering your ears with some headphones, for example with classical music. It seems to me that something impressionistic would suit. For example, Stravinsky. But definitely not The Little Mermaid, no. After training, I moved to another site. By the way, changes here are constant. This allows to bring in at least some diversity in this generally very monotonous activity. I would gladly tell you something very exciting about this process. In fact, nothing exciting is here. Although there are lots of tricks and experienced handlers clean the fish, in general, in 2 movements. But if I start doing this, I can easily cut one of my necessary fingers. And secondly, responsibility is a pressure for me, because I'm cleaning fish for the first time, and I understand perfectly that someone will eat the herring cleaned by me. Even though there are, let's say, a gym and the internet, but still, people are in a confined space. By the standards of the fishing fleet, conditions on floating bases are considered to be comfortable, and Vsevolod Sibirtsev is thought of as the most comfortable of all the ships. Most of the crew here live in double cabins. On all residential decks, there is a Wi-Fi network with internet access. At least here it is simply spacious. But if you can't imagine your life without a personal shower in your private cabin, then you have nothing to do in the fishing fleet. Natalia came to Primoria from Ufa. Since 2011, she's been going to sea, had time to work on short expeditions, and eventually decided on a long one.
I'd say that living conditions in this company aren't bad. I also worked on a mini base, Kapitan Yefremov, also belonging to the same company, in 2011, by the way. It was my first ship. Same conditions and meals are good.
Kapitan Yefremov is one of those so-called mini-bases built for the project, Kamchatsky's Shelf. These vessels have a length of 126 meters and a displacement of about 9,000 tons. Modest indicators by the standards of Vsevolod Sibirtsev. In total, 6 such bases were built between 1990 and 1995. Before Vsevolod Sibirtsev appeared, it was the small floating bases that were the main marine production complexes of Dobroflot. It was on such floating bases that the business processes and interaction of fish processing ships with fishing ships were worked out. And it was here that the 6-6 schedule was worked out, according to which all those who were engaged in processing the catch in the open seas lived and worked. That is, after a 6-hour shift, the sailor received the same amount of rest time, after which the cycle was repeated. It is not easy to get used to such a schedule. There are such moments sometimes when people foreign to the sea don't get used to the fact that the ship rolls, that it influences the health somehow. They can't get used to that. They become seasick. We have to look for some compromises. In any case, people must adapt themselves to the work of the ship, not the ship to the people. So they get used to the sway. They get used to the sway of life. The mode of operation, which has proved itself at small floating bases, turned out to be unsuitable for a large factory ship that leaves the dock for most of the year.
We, of course, worked all this time, 6 on, 6 off, but many simply couldn't stand it. They resigned. They left.
And it was difficult not only for ordinary factory workers, but also for those who are responsible for organizing the whole process. For example, Yuri Arshinin, the head of the Vsevolod Sibirtsev production, does not consider the 6-6 schedule as universal. I think that 6-6 is ineffective. 12-12 here is more, and the productivity will be better, and you can demand from people, because they sleep. They have 8 hours of continuous sleep. Let's say, food is good, there is personal hygiene, the cabin is in order, and so on. However, a 12-hour shift means a longer stay in the standing position, and often in the not most health-friendly conditions. And then there may be questions from doctors already. How does this work schedule with 12-hour shifts affect the health of the crew? Most of all, a prolonged static stress in a required position influences the health. So that's what Dobroflot's managers have to keep in mind all the time, being between Sila of workflow processes and Charybdis of workers' health. After all, people are a resource for the company no less valuable than unique vessels. Of course, it would be possible to adopt the shift schedule adopted in the military fleet at the time of Peter I. The shifts still have a duration of 4 hours, and breaks between them are 8 hours long. Undoubtedly, there are also so-called extra shift duties for military seamen, but on the whole, this schedule seems more convenient. However, in order to make the work in 3 shifts possible, it would be necessary to increase the number of workers by 1.5 times. And this is not in any way applicable to the size of even such a huge factory ship as Vsevolod Sibirtsev, nor to the parameters of the business plan. However, the sailors knew what they signed up for. Of course, if the person can't take it anymore, can't get used to the sway, to the conditions on board, there are such cases. We can send the person, if they want it, to shore without any problems. Often, the only incentive to adapt is the financial one. Natalia, for example, doesn't even bother herself with comparing salaries at sea and on shore. She understands that you cannot earn for your own accommodation on shore.
You work on the shore, you still spend that money, right? And let's say there's no opportunity to save up some money, for example, to have your own plans, some goals, and when you are in the sea, you return from the expedition and you get all your earnings.
But you've still got to work to get all your earnings. That is, to work till the end of the expedition. And it's not so easy, even for those who understand what they got into. Even for them, the schedule is sometimes unbearable. However, it's not that easy to decide on the early termination of the contract. Not only will you not get your full salary, you will also experience some financial losses. Work at the floating base never stops. If there are no raw materials, there is an overload of supply or finished products. Vsevolod Sibirtsev has already left the territorial waters and is now in the exclusively economic zone of Russia. Now nothing prevents the overload of supplies, and one of the ships that provide the connection of the expedition with the shore, Garbonia, gives the cargo not only to the shipping base, but also to fishing vessels. In order to capture 3 time zones at once, it is not necessary to get to a low Earth orbit. You just need to find the moment when the supply from the carry-away ship, here it is, Garbonia, is in the middle, is being unloaded both onto the floating base and a fishing ship. Garbonia's time is set as in Vladivostok. It corresponds to the home port and the location of the company's head office. Therefore, it's 13:30 now on the ship. The fishing ship has the time zone of the region where it operates. So now it's 2 hours later on it, 15:30. Well, and the floating base is between those 2 time zones. Therefore, here the ship's clock is set in accordance with the time zone, which is called UTC plus 11. That is 11 hours ahead of Greenwich, and 8 more than in Moscow. As the head of the production promised, the unloading was quick. And just in a day, Garbonia is filling cargo hatches to set to the return course towards Nakhodka, leaving Vsevolod Sibirtsev behind, this huge factory ship, a part of the rich Soviet legacy. Not all such vessels have found a place in the recent history of the Russian fleet. It would have been just easier to declare fish processing factory ships a Soviet relic, turn a couple of them into museums and junk the rest. But these vessels are also jobs, that is, life for many hundreds and thousands of people who have chosen such work for themselves. A job that is very difficult to separate from life itself. But still, I couldn't help but ask our heroes, where is real life for them? At sea or on shore? Real life. Let's say the ship is the second home, of course. Family is the first home, ship is the second.
Of course, on the shore. I just work here. I make money, and that's it.
Definitely in the sea. I've been a captain for 30 years. There aren't many vacations. Life is like that, just a few vacations. So I'm at sea. Real life is on shore. Here it is work. Of course, on shore, no doubt. Family is waiting, relatives, and my grandchildren. So, life is better on shore. I think at sea. Firstly, I personally know everything at sea. At sea, there are no questions from which it would be necessary. Problems from which it would be necessary to escape, hide, flee somehow. There are no such things at sea. Real life is, of course, on shore. Here, it's kind of work. There is nostalgia, a wish to return. If there's been a long period, like 3 to 4 months, it's time to work, catch fish. Of course, the sea is exciting. First, it is the very process. Yes, it is very difficult at sea. But to be honest, sometimes there is no time to sleep. But days go by very quickly. It's real everywhere, both here and on shore. So there will be another day, and it will be January 1st. They will celebrate modestly, and already at 10 minutes after midnight, Roman will take his place at the crane, Natalia at the conveyors. Yuri Vasilievich will supervise so that the production goes without failures. Vladimir Petrovich Slizov will confirm the navigation course to Nakhodka, and Valery Mikhailovich Voloshin will take farewell of his colleague with a lingering signal. Sergei Bova will give an order to set the trawler controlled by Igor Valiev, and all of them will wait for the most important holiday for sailors, the day of their return to home. Then again, they'll go to the sea.